Here's one of my first real horror stories from when I was home alone as a teenager. It was that night I heard the sound that changed everything. I was 17 at the time, living with my parents in rural Vermont, about an hour north of Burlington. Our house was old, built in the 1920s, the kind of place with creaky floorboards and drafty windows that whistled when the wind picked up. It sat on about 3 acres of land, surrounded by fields and scattered trees. The nearest neighbor was maybe half a mile down the road. And this happened in deep winter. It had snowed the night before, covering everything in fresh powder. My parents had gone to visit my grandmother in Ohio. She had a fall, nothing too serious, but enough that my mom wanted to be there to help out for a few days. They'd asked if I wanted to come along, but I had worked that weekend, stocking shelves at the hardware store in town. I'd only had the job for a few months and didn't want to ask for time off. Looking back now, I should have gone with them. They left on a Thursday afternoon. I remember my mom going through the usual list. Don't leave the stove on, lock the doors at night, call if anything happens, there's food in the freezer. I nodded along. Yes, Mom, I'll lock the doors. Who's going to come all the way out here anyway? She gave me that look. You know the one that says she's not joking. As soon as their car disappeared down the driveway, I felt that strange mix of freedom and responsibility that comes with being alone in a house. The quiet settled in fast, heavier than I expected. That first night was fine. I made myself dinner, watched TV, went to bed around midnight. The house made its usual sounds, the furnace kicking on, the wood settling, nothing out of the ordinary. I slept straight through until my alarm went off at 6 for my shift. Friday was normal too. Work, came home, heated up leftovers. I called my parents around 8 to let them know everything was good. My mom asked if I was keeping the doors locked. I told her yes, even though I'd only locked the front door and hadn't bothered with the back. We lived in the middle of nowhere. Who was going to come all the way out here? It was Friday night when things started. I was in the living room watching a movie, probably around 11. That's when the sound cut through everything. A single knock on the back door. Not loud, not aggressive, just 3 soft taps. I muted the TV and sat there listening, my hand frozen on the remote. Nothing, just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the sound of my own breathing. I figured maybe it was a branch or something hitting the door in the wind, even though there wasn't much wind that night. Even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. I got up and walked to the kitchen, turned on the back porch light, and looked out through the window in the door. Nothing, just the empty porch and the dark yard beyond. I stood there for a minute, hand on the doorknob, debating whether to open it. Something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the knock had sounded, too measured, too purposeful. I flipped the lock instead and went back to the living room, turned the movie back on. About an hour later, it happened again. I waited maybe 30 seconds, then I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, walked back to the kitchen. I didn't turn on the porch light this time, I just shined my phone through the window. Still nothing. I unlocked the door, opened it a crack, and looked out. The porch was empty, the yard was dark and still. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded small and stupid in the quiet. No response. I closed the door, locked it, and this time I made sure the deadbolt was turned too. Then I went around the whole first floor and checked every window, every door. Everything was locked. I told myself it was fine. Maybe it was an animal, maybe it was nothing. But I didn't believe that. I tried to keep watching the movie, but I couldn't focus. Every sound the house made, every creak of the floorboards, every rattle of the windows, I was listening for it, waiting for another knock. It didn't come that night. I barely slept. I kept my bedroom door locked and my phone next to my pillow. Every time I started to drift off, I'd hear something, a sound from downstairs, and I'd be awake again, staring at the ceiling. Saturday morning, I felt like hell. I went to work on maybe 3 hours of sleep, and the whole shift I kept thinking about those knocks. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, or that it really had been something harmless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing on that porch, looking in at me through the dark. And I kept thinking about my mom. The way she'd insisted I lock the doors, the way she'd looked at me when I made that joke, like she knew something. Why hadn't she said more? When I got home around 4, the first thing I did was walk around the outside of the house. I checked the back porch, the area around the door, looking for footprints or any sign that someone had been there. The snow was untouched, fresh, like no one had walked there at all, but I knew what I'd heard. Those weren't branches. That night I made sure every door and every window was locked before the sun even went down. I kept the lights on in most of the house. I didn't want any dark corners, any places where I couldn't see. Around 9, my phone rang. It was my parents. I told them everything was fine. I didn't mention the knocks. What would I even say? That I heard a noise and got scared? I was 17. I wasn't going to sound like a kid who couldn't handle being alone. After I hung up, I sat in the living room with the TV on, but I wasn't really watching. I was listening, waiting. And then, at exactly 11:13 p.m., I know because I checked my phone, it happened again. This time, they were on the front door. My stomach dropped. I didn't move. I just sat there on the couch, frozen, staring at the front door from across the room. The knocks didn't come again, just those three, and then silence. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. Finally, I stood up, grabbed the baseball bat we kept by the coat closet, and walked slowly to the door. My chest was pulsing and my hands were shaking. I looked through the peephole. Nothing, just the empty porch and the driveway beyond, lit by the porch light. I backed away, clutching the bat, when suddenly I heard the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow on the side of the house. Slow footsteps moving back and forth. My whole body froze. Someone was there. Someone was walking around my house. I ran as quietly as possible to the kitchen window and looked out toward the back porch. The snow was lit by the porch light, and now I could see them. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the snow, leading from the side of the house to the back door, and they went all the way around the house. I could see the trail in the snow, a complete loop around the property, ending right at the back porch. And then I saw the silhouette. It entered the perimeter, lit by the porch light, and stopped. Only its legs were visible from about the knees down, the rest of its body in shadow. It was wearing dark pants, maybe jeans. Normal shoes, not boots. But then I saw something else, something dragging in the snow beside the figure, a long handle, and at the end of it, the unmistakable shape of an axe head cutting a thin line through the snow as the figure shifted its weight. And the arm holding it. The arm looked wrong. Too long. It's the way it hung there, the axe dragging behind. The proportions didn't make sense, like the arm extended further than it should. The figure didn't move forward. It just stood there, motionless, the axe scraping slightly in the snow every time it adjusted its grip, just standing at the edge of the light, waiting. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone when I fumbled for it to call 911. My voice came out thin and shaky when the dispatcher answered. I told them someone was outside my house, that I was alone, that I needed help, right now. The dispatcher, a woman with a calm voice that somehow made it worse, told me to stay inside, keep the doors locked, that a deputy was on the way. She stayed on the line with me. She asked me questions. Where was I in the house? Were all the doors locked? Could I still see the person? I kept watching the back door. The figure didn't move. They just stood there at the edge of the light, like they were waiting for something. Like they had all the time in the world. I couldn't see their face. I couldn't see anything above their waist. Just their legs, standing perfectly still on my back porch. The dispatcher asked me if I could describe them. I said I couldn't see them clearly. She asked if they were trying to get in. I said no, they were just standing there. And then they moved. Not toward the door. They took one step back into the darkness and disappeared. I ran to the living room window that faced the side yard and looked out. Nothing. I couldn't see anyone. I went to the front window. The driveway was empty. I checked every window I could see from, and there was no one. They were gone. The deputy showed up about 15 minutes later. I saw his lights first, red and blue flashing through the front windows, then heard his car in the driveway. I let him in, still holding the baseball bat. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a tired expression that suggested this wasn't his first call about strange noises in the night. He asked me what happened, and I told him everything. The knocking over the past 2 nights, the footsteps around the house, the figure standing at the edge of the porch light. He wrote it all down in a little notebook, nodding occasionally. Then he walked around the outside of the house with his flashlight, checked the porch, the yard, the driveway. I watched from the window. His flashlight swept across the snow and trees at the edge of the property. He was out there for maybe 10 minutes. When he came back, he said he didn't see anyone. No disturbing footprints in the snow, nothing that had been disturbed. He asked if I'd seen the person's face. I said no. He asked if they'd tried to open any doors or windows. I said no, they'd just knocked and walked around. He asked if I'd had any arguments with anyone recently, any problems at school or work, anyone who might want to mess with me. I said no. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to decide something. Finally, he said it could have been kids, or maybe someone drunk who got lost and ended up at the wrong house. He told me to keep everything locked and to call again if anything else happened. His tone suggested he didn't think anything else would happen, that maybe I'd overreacted to some nothing situation. Then he left. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the living room with every light on and the bat in my lap, watching the doors, listening for any sound. Nothing happened. No knocks, no footsteps. Just silence. My parents came home Sunday afternoon. I didn't tell them what happened. I didn't want to deal with the questions, the worry, the way they'd look at me. I just said everything had been fine. But a few weeks later, my father confided in me. He had spoken to our neighbor who lived about a kilometer away from us. Apparently, he had also heard the knocks. The same pattern, 3 knocks, every night for a week. But one night, he had opened the door. My father just said that the neighbor had been in the hospital ever since, and really, he didn't want to say more. I never told my dad that it had happened to us too, but I think about it all the time. About how whoever it was had been doing this to multiple houses. About how they'd just stand there at the edge of the light waiting. About what they were waiting for. And I wonder what would have happened if I had opened the door.